of the places I like starting with my interviews, especially with an artist who is as, you know, such a huge oeuvre like you do, is where you started off. I know you're from New Zealand, but I'm always interested to hearing about your childhood and what you remember of art as a child and in the home, that sort of thing.
Okay, well, I lived in Hamilton, which is a little town in New Zealand. And I came from a non-art background. Like my parents were accountants. Well, dad was an accountant. Mum worked at the Inland Revenue, which is the ATO. So that's where they met. So art was never a really, like something in our lives. I think we had a Constable print. That was the only art that we had in our house. And I remember sort of always looking at it going, that's incredible and amazing. And, but at the same time, it's so dull. Um, you know,
What was it? Do you remember?
it was like these horses, a horse and cart crossing a bridge. And it was like I'd stare at it for hours on end, just kind of going, where are they going? What's happening here? But I don't think mum and dad bought it for that reason. It was like a print in one of those bad frames. So it was quite funny looking back. But I guess I got into art like as a therapeutic way and a way of escapism. It wasn't always the most how do I say this, healthy sort of upbringing in a way, and I used my art to really make sense of what was happening in our family and also to escape.
So when you say you were doing art, you mean as a
Yeah,
child?
yeah. I'd have a little, room under the sort of stairs, and it's sort of like not a studio. It's just a little room, But I kind of set it up as my own, and it was great. It was sort of I got the paints out, and that's the way that I started.
When you were at high school, did you see yourself as an arty kid?
I kind of that I mean our school was 1,800 boys, so it was a huge boys' school, and it was right rugby, and I played rugby and I played sport, which was lucky. Otherwise, I think you would have got beaten up, if you just did art, because it wasn't. I think I was one of the first people to apply to go to art school from our school. So it was kind of like a big step, but it was something that I just knew that I was kind of obsessed with, and I would be in the art room all the time. And eventually, the teachers kind of, from maths or English, I failed all those subjects, multiple times over the fifth, sixth, seventh form. So I would just go back to the art room. But the teachers knew I was there, and they kind of went, "Oh well, it's better than him not being in class." So they just let that roll. I mean,
Yeah.
that would never happen now, never.
No, no, I know. I've often heard of stories of that from like, you know, the 80s or the 70s.
And that's when it was, and it was like, like at least we're doing something, and it was constructive. And so from a very early age, I just kind of always knew that I'd be an artist, but it was like in what sort of context or whatever, like because all my family were like accountants, so it was like, well, you go to university to do, study economics, or but thankfully my parents knew how bad I was at all of that. So it wasn't even an option. It was like, well, you'll go to art school. But then again, it was like there was no job to come out of art school. There was, like maybe teaching. But I remember saying to my mum, like, oh, well, it's great. I know what I'm going to be. I'm going to be an artist. And she'd be like, yeah,
So how did they react when you started becoming successful?
I don't really, I don't ever really think they thought I was successful. Do you know what I mean? It was kind of like, it wasn't really like that. That's what Richard does, but it's not, yeah, that was never,
So you never had the conversation, you made it, son, we were wrong.
no, no, no. I mean, it's a different generation as well. I don't think I
Yeah.
ever had that, like we're so proud or they would, yeah, it just didn't happen. But, and I don't look back and go, oh, poor me. It just wasn't in our family DNA.
Yeah, yeah, I totally get it. Yeah.
You know,
And
yep.
it would probably be weird if they said it.
Oh God, you'd be freaky if they then said, "Oh, we're really happy that you're doing this or that." But yeah, it is what it is.
So you went to the Elim School of Fine Arts, which is with Auckland University, I think. Is
Right.
that right?
Yeah.
What was that experience like?
At Elam, again, I felt like a bit of an outsider because I was from Hamilton, and most of the people that went there were from Auckland, and they were sophisticated and they were city, whereas I was kind of more rural, like I wore jandals and jeans, and I wasn't that stylish. So I felt kind of outsider again, which was kind of weird. So again, I gravitated to the art that just was escapism. It was kind of the only thing that um, I kind of knew or was my safety blanket in a way. And I was there for 4 years, I think, and that was, like, I don't know if you learn anything. I think it's just a time or a place that you get to, become as a person, you start to discover who you actually are and the friends that you have and the experiences that you sort of gather from there. I mean, I had good enough tutors, but I never really gravitated to anyone or anything. I just carried, I think one of my tutors just sort of said, oh, you were always there, always busy, but you always just did your own thing. And that kind of summed me up, really. I was,
And
like,
what was your own thing back then?
it was kind of autobiographical still. It was still looking at, things that are in my life and revolve around my life. And it wasn't necessarily art driven. It was kind of more about the experience and more about trying to tell my stories.
So not painting?
Yeah, painting. Yeah, I was in the painting department and it was kind of, but it wasn't necessarily about art. Like I remember failing art history miserably. Looking back on it, I wish I did pay more attention to art history, but at the time it was sort of, again, I just used that art as escapism.
So when you say escapism, you mean just to deal with your own emotional state, sort of a thing. So you were doing like therapy.
Like therapy, 100%. And it was a dirty word, and it was like you've got to understand yourself more and where art comes from. And I get that now, but like at the time, I was pretty headstrong on like, no, that doesn't matter. This is who I am now. This is why I make art. And I never sort of, I didn't really have any ambition whatsoever because there was no such thing as ambition really when I went to art school. Like I just kind of knew that I'd always make art, but how I was going to do that, who knew? And I think it was fourth year gallerist by the name of Warrick Brown, who became quite a influential collector and gallerist in Auckland, came to my show and he bought up all my drawings. And it was quite amazing. And at the time, I think I was like, the bank was chasing me. I was so broke. And like, like he wrote me this check and it was like, I went home and all I was living with about five different guys at the time. And we just all just had such a party that time I cashed a check. But it was like amazing to think that Warwick, I don't know, that sort of, I guess, supported that and actually validated those things. And he said, "Why don't we have a show?" And that was my first show with Warrick Brown. And even when I started and I sort of moved to a gallery, Rex Gallery with Jennifer and Rex, they're really super supportive, and it was almost like you got a step in, which was really cool. And the role of the gallery was different because it financially supported you while you were making the work.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
And,
I've heard of that sort of setup.
and it
Yeah.
was amazing because I mean I moved back to Melbourne then, and then I remember just sending faxes to Jen and Rex every week and go, oh my God, I'm so broke, da da da, and then I'd send back a fax and go, well, we're gonna put some money in your account, and that's just the way it worked, and it was and I'll never forget the support because that enabled me to carry on because of those people, and yeah, sometimes it was financially, but a lot of the time, like with Warwick, it was just a person that would pick up the phone and talk to you about art and people and what was going on, and so that was great. I don't know if that happens now.
But then you came to Australia because you now live in Melbourne. So what was the catalyst for that?
I think I was having a show. I was having a show at Jennifer and Rex's, and it went really well and everything. And I wanted more. I want to kind of go and see more and experience a larger place that I could sort of make my work, but also show my work. Because I think like Auckland became pretty small because I'd been there for like a good sort of 6 years, 7 years. And so like I thought, oh, I'll come to Sydney. And I think it was just some person said to me, "Oh, Sydney will be great for you." Da, da, da. And I went to Sydney and I disliked it immensely. As soon as I
Really?
got there, yeah, I just did not like it. It was so hard to sort of get a studio to try to set myself up. And my auntie and uncle lived in Melbourne, so they said, "Why don't you come to Melbourne?" And that they took me in, and that was, it was just a really good introduction, I think, in a way. Maybe if I had different people in Sydney, it would have been different, but it was easier to get a studio and to kind of be amongst a lot more artists.
So how did you meet people?
I like at openings, different galleries and things like that would just from New Zealand would then introduce me to other gallerists in here and collectors and people like that. But I found it really, really difficult. Like I approached quite a few different galleries and nothing was happening, and it was basically showing back in New Zealand most of the time, or pretty much 99% of the time. And it wasn't until I did my master's at VCA in 2000 that I actually felt like I sort of got plugged into Melbourne.
Yeah, right.
And then that's when the doors opened a bit, and
Yeah.
kind of I guess people didn't see you as such an outsider, because you were part of that institution of BCA. And I from in 2001 I did a boxing exhibition with Luke Sinclair at Conical Gallery where I challenged him to a boxing match, and that sort of opened up a whole lot of different.
Oh, what do you mean you challenged him to a boxing match?
I challenged I challenged him to a boxing match. I didn't know him well, and then we both trained differently. Like I trained at Preston and Preston gym, and then he trained, I think it was in St Kilda. And then after 8 months training, we came together for a fight at Conical Gallery, and it was
What?
yeah, and it was incredible because I was talking about it like as an artist, sort of you get up, it's training and skill discipline, just like the boxing. I would be training as a boxer. And I just felt like there was all these connections there and patterns, exactly like making art. And I really wanted to sort of like, I liked the physicality. I liked the sort of all of that discipline. So boxing was the best way to sort of do that in a gallery. And so it was a, full size boxing ring. We had, independent referees, judges. Um, and looking back on it, it was probably one of the best things I've ever done. Where I trained though as well was a big part of it. And so they instilled on me about the discipline of boxing and about the art form and about repetition and about the timing and about all of these things that then you look at a painting and you can dissect the same things. And so it was I love the sort of the synergy and I guess the similarities between the two, but also going into another subculture like the boxers was
Mm.
eye-opening. That I, it was an artist. It was kind of plumbers, electricians, lawyers, doctors. It was all walks of life, which was amazing. So it was like I
Incredible.
loved it. I loved it that that wasn't part of the art world, and I've kind of gravitated to that ever since, really.
Yeah, right. And and I take it wasn't choreographed or anything. It was just a natural. And who won?
I won, like Luke, because he was a massive part of it. I didn't realize how big a part of it he was. He goes, I want to win it. And I was kind of like, I was quite scared because I was like, fuck, I'm going to look really stupid if I lose this because I've put all this on and like all these people have come and da, da. But it's like you have to have that self-belief. So it's like I was crowned the what was it, the middleweight champion artist of the world. And I think Seven used a little thing on out, afterwards, and I was kind of like that bolshy person that won, or the fighter that won, and I challenged anyone out there. I never got any challenges, thank God. But like looking back on it, it
Yeah.
was
I see what you mean. I see it's a precursor for what came after in a way, because you have done sort of various artworks relating to that, which have been really interesting.
yeah.
Well, I want to jump to your work now, to your later work. And I was looking over your whole, work you've done over the years and all the bodies of work. And I thought, oh gosh, I could do a podcast episode about every single body of work. So I thought, how am I going to narrow this down? I know I'm going to pick the works that I have seen personally in real life and that have made an impact on me. So this is by no means, I want everyone to know out there that it's by no means comprehensive of what you do because you've done so much work. But this, I wanted to start off with a work I saw a few years back in the Sulman. It was one of your Sulman paintings,
All right.
and it was the most striking work, and it was of your father in a
Oh, right.
hospital bed.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he looked quite ill in that work, and the bed and he were quite white, and but the hospital room had this darkness about it around him and this decay about it. And something haunting almost for me, you know. And the interesting thing about it was that it was an oil painting on steel, and
Yeah.
it was like about 140 centimeters by about 80 centimeters, just to get a sense of the scale. And it was titled, "We Have Grave Concerns for Your Father's Health." And immediately, just by the title, it's made, you know, we've got a story going because we've got at least two other people involved in this. Can you tell me a bit about this work?
Yeah, I guess like I mean I don't try to. I paint extreme situations, and possibly that was one of the most extreme situations where my mother had probably a year before had passed away, and dad was not in a good way mentally and physically, and so he was in this hospital bed, and he was in like the title suggests, he was in a really bad way. And the doctors sort of came to me and sort of said, "We've grave concerns about your father." And it was fascinating how to take that on board. And like I remember reaching out to Dad's hand and going, "Dad, like this is, really, really tough going and everything." And he kind of brushed my hand away, like he didn't want to have any emotion to it. I was like, "Oh, okay, I tried." But like it was interesting that then Dad almost became like the child, and I had to then become the adult in the relationship, and had to take this on and try to have to. Then I had to sort of reach out to my brother and sister and tell them the news, what was happening. So it was kind of like this incredibly. It was really sad, but it was also really emotionally charged of trying to understand or know what to do in that situation.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a lot of the times in that room, I would just, Dad's not a big talker. So, so he would sit there and I'd sit there, for hours on end without saying anything. And it was in a hospital room in Hamilton where I was born, and it's pretty grim in there, and there's not much going on. And but it's something that I needed to kind of, I guess, paint for therapy again, for a
Totally.
way to sort of tell that story. And it's probably one of my favorite works, to be honest. It's kind of like the documentation, and like I painted mum's funeral as well, and I've kind of painted all our family's funerals because I feel like they're just or not their funerals, but was yeah, sometimes the funerals, but they're maybe their last sort of days, and I kind of feel that's what I can do as an artist. I've even got
Mm-hmm.
sort of one lady, Anne Bennett, that I'm painting her coffin as soon as she passes away. So we've been talking about that for some time now, which is, but I kind of go as an artist, I go, that's amazing. I've got that responsibility and that job to do that, and I kind of take that on. I've used that hospital bed room, or not, the hospital room, quite a few different times in paintings as well. So I sort of come back to these things and
Yeah, I saw on your Instagram there's one going into the Hugo Michel show
mm,
next week, of you in the hospital bed with a doctor
yeah.
next to you. I think you're grappling with this sort of constant headaches. Um,
Yeah, and it's I mean it's been it's the title's something like being crying wolf, and it's interesting because like I'd always have all these childhood sort of not yeah traumas and pain and things, and Dad would always be so dismissive of it. So I wanted to put myself in Dad's room there with my urologist now, there, Dr. Ghani. So it was kind of like pulling and twisting stories now and then in the past, that sort of idea of layering things and sort of working out what is actually truth and what's sort of what's memory and what's correct and what's not.
It's so true. And I mean, I love when you've done those Richard's Disasters series where you're remembering incidents that happened, like you almost drowned in the neighbor's pool and this sort of thing. And in fact, you've got a painting behind you, also, which is a memory from the past. And interestingly, behind you, we can also see how you've got a separate little painting next to it, which is the narrative of the story in the painting. Do you think that's an important part of those works?
Yeah, it kind of changed. Like I did a show at Hugo's quite a few years ago now, and it was like people were really fascinated in the stories. So I'd kind of get sick of repeating them. And I thought, you know what? I'm actually going to tell the stories because they are just as important as the paintings. And it's like it's a way of documenting again. And for Jan Murphy's show last year, I did that, and I think it worked really well. So again, I was kind of playing with that idea of how these things would sit alongside each other, or would it be too much or whatever. But in the end, you kind of go, it's right for the work.
And also, it's an artwork in itself because
Yeah,
it's
yeah, absolutely. And I treat it kind of like that as well. And it's kind of as I'm doing the painting, it's part of the palette, and then it becomes, it changes, and it's text has always been an important part of my work anyway. So it sort of felt like a good thing to put these things together.
yeah. Well, there's a lot of text in that other Sulman work that I really loved, which was Richard's medical disasters. I love that one because I should point out, by the way, I don't think we've mentioned this. There's often a lot of humor in your work.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean,
When
there's humor in it. I mean, this it's like a blackboard with a white silhouetted figure of this person standing there, and then there's just all this text on the side saying what's wrong with each part of the body, which is I presume, your ailments. Like, and it gets pretty
yeah.
personal. Like we get like UTIs and
I know I'm
IBS.
going. Podcast people can't see it, but I'm going all red here. It is kind of funny because you kind of it's I don't know, it's embarrassing. It's like I know these people that bought it, and they're super nice too, and I kind of go, oh my God, it's just cringy talking to them now because they go know everything. But at the same time, like I heard a beautiful story that these people were looking at it at the New South Wales Art Gallery, and they were going, oh God, he thinks he's got problems. I've got this and this and this. So people put their own stories on it, which is great. So it lets me sort of slip into the background. And I kind of go, again, it's therapy. It's like I outline these things that my ailments. I mean, and they're all true, and they're all, there's quite a few of them. I mean, my wife always goes, "Oh my God, you can only have 3 things per day." What's going on, and it is a hypochondriac, but it's funny. It's meant to be funny. I don't ever want to go, oh, people to go, oh, poor Richard. It's not about that. Um,
No.
but
So you don't
it's
ever feel like you're revealing too much about yourself?
I do when I'm on a podcast talking about it. Yeah. But you have to remember that you're in the studio painting these things by yourself. I don't ever think, oh, this is going here and this is going to be the audience to see it. It's like confessions or, other public sort of works that I've done. Yeah, I never really think too much about how these things are going to be read in the public. And yeah, they are super oversharing. But a lot of the time people don't even know who I am, or they don't contact me. So it's okay. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
these things
yeah. But
this
also, you know what? It helps other people. And
yeah, yeah, yeah.
you were talking about the confessions. I love that series of Richard's confessions because that's another thing I did see is that at the NGV last year, I went to the triennial and there was some beautiful works of yours there. There was 2 rooms of your work and yeah, so one body of work that I'm talking about it was called Richard Lewer's Confessions. And that consisted of these statements on pegboards that you had painted, which were actual confessions that people had told you. I think, did you actually have a confession box there?
But yeah, the interview made a confession box, and then I sort of said what I wanted to do, and they were in the end they were amazing because they didn't really know how it was going to go, and I didn't either. I'd never done a public confession, and people were kind of going, "What happens if people mention political or social things? What are you going to do?" And I'm kind of like, "Oh, I don't know, like how are you going to work those things out?" Like, and it was kind of fascinating because I would sit in this box, and then people would come in there. And then some people would tell me their life story and be in there for 45 minutes. Other people would,
No, really?
yeah, yeah. And some people were like, Richard, what would I do in this situation? And I'm like, oh, I've got to stop you. I'm an artist. I don't even, I wouldn't know because people are asking it advice. And it's kind of like, different if they want to make the color green or something like that. But these people are talking about life-changing things. And I'm like, oh my God. But it was fascinating that people kind of trust you,
Yes.
but then some people were funny with things and just come in 5 minutes or 2 minutes and then they say something and then they run out. Um,
Did you feel like they were being really, like I'll just, so people know what we're talking about. Like, for example, one was, I don't think I'll miss my dad when he dies. Another one is, I like it when my friends are jealous of me. So things that are sort of shameful, I suppose.
yeah,
Shame is a big thing, I think, when we're
it
talking about this confessions and things like that.
It is, and it's the personal things that then people open up. It was dark, so I really couldn't see anyone because there was a pegboard that was separating us as well. So it was kind of, along the lines of, like I wouldn't know who they were anyway. So it's kind of, and it was almost like not getting rid of guilt, but just like opening up of this one thing that they want to get off their chest. And it was, like when I look back on it, it went really well, but it was, again, it was just risky because I had no idea how it was going to go. And I felt probably the hardest thing was actually painting them on the wall when people were there, so it became kind of quite a performance piece, which I didn't realize. You turn around, there might be 400 people watching me,
Oh, really?
right? Yeah, and but my spelling is terrible at the best of times, and I was kind of like, I might be spelling the word bring, and when you go, okay, bring, but then once you're painting on a wall, it becomes not the word, it becomes this paint thing that you're painting, and like, it was
Like an
terrible.
abstract thing. Yeah.
Absolutely. So I'd be going, how do I spell bring? And there'd be someone in the crowd sort of telling me how to do this. So you just got to go with it, I guess. But looking back on it, like I was so kind of chuffed the way that it all sort of went, and people were brave enough, I guess, to sort of trust me with their sins. And some are funny, some are sad, some are horrendous. So you got all walks of life coming in.
Mm. And also, it just struck me that the reason you painted these on pegboard was because of the confessional box. Is that right? Because of the pegboard that's between the
Yes.
two of you?
And that box was like in Hamilton in New Zealand. My, priest that we would confess to, he had a little pegboard divider. So it all sort of
Okay.
came from that.
So what was it like when you were a kid? Did you actually go to confession?
Yeah, all the time. Yeah, we'd go every week. But it would be quite crazy that you'd go once a week and it'd be like you've got to almost make up things. And the priest knew that because well, like we were young and we just, kind of said what we needed to say. I've been swearing, I've been hitting my brother, I've been lying. Okay, do these Hail Marys and all's forgiven. They were pretty tame and stuff. But like we were, like I said, we would go once a week and you'd kind of go, I've got nothing more to say. It was more of a chore that we sort of had to do.
Now, one of the very interesting things about your work that I've already alluded to is the substrate that you use for your paintings, because often it is not canvas. It could be aluminium. I've talked about steel. It could be concrete, or a billiard table. Um, can you tell me a bit about why you're attracted to using these substrates which aren't canvas?
Yeah, like I guess in a way, I don't go seeking them. It becomes about from what I'm trying to say with the stories that I'm making or telling. So like the billboard tables, they were crime stories, and Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker, got the only way he got caught was he was bragging around the pool tables, at the pub. But then when I looked into the pool table skins, it was amazing to sort of see the remnants and the fat skin, the fat from hands going in and beer stains and cigarette things. So it was kind of like this idea of the stories being told around these pool table skins, or whether it's oh God, there's so many different materials that I've sort of used, but really but it goes back to the connection that it has to the story. So like the show next week at Hugo's is all on Formica tables, and again that comes from the storytelling around tables that we sort of had as a kid growing up, and many people have as well. So again, it's sort of like I'm attracted to those materials that are not necessarily art objects. They are objects of storytelling, but also of familiarity. And I mean, I find the hardest thing to paint on is canvas. I don't know why people paint on canvas. It's so hard. And I mean, I do love the challenge as well. Like it's an anti-stick thing for Formica table. So again, I'm attracted to that physical way of painting and trying to make a painting on these materials that are not sort of necessary art materials. These things just have the residue of other, stories that are attached to, or another layer or baggage that again makes it for a rich painting.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting that that body of work that is going to the National Gallery, that's called Steve. That's on those. So I think there's 14 paintings, but also a stop motion animation, which is sounds incredible. And they're on laminate tables. Is that right?
Yeah, so the Formica laminates, same thing.
Oh, I see.
So like the way I sort of started those tables is Steve is about my good friend Pete's father who has dementia. So I would go around to Pete's house with Christine, his mum, and we would talk about Steve around, the Formica table and have a cup of tea. And that's the way that these stories sort of eventuated. And it was like Steve losing these memories, losing his sort of, I guess, life. And it was amazing to hear Pete and Christine talk about losing their father and losing a husband. And so I wanted to sort of tell these stories around the table. And it was an animation, like when I do these animations every sort of 3 or 4 years, and maybe a bit longer. But again, I don't really go and seek an animation. It's just the best way to tell that story. Like I'm not an animator. That's probably why the animations are probably quite naive and are pretty hokey. Sort of my animations are very hokey, but it's just telling the story. And again, these were painted on tables and then wiped away, and it's like this. I didn't know if it was going to work, and I still don't know if it's going to work really. But it's a way of telling these stories that fits into Steve, the story.
Yeah, right. So it's like hundreds of, I haven't actually, so I haven't seen that video. So it obviously hasn't been released, I presume, yet
Yeah,
publicly.
yeah. I
Yeah.
think November the 29th, I think, is the show.
Yeah, right,
Not
right.
really a stop motion as well. It's more, God, I don't even know if there's a term for it. It's a real sort of um uh live paint. It's a performance again, really.
Yeah. Well,
So
I mean, I loved the work that you won the Blake Prize with. Worse luck, I'm still here. And I'll put a link in the show notes for that, whoever wants to see it, because I really found it so moving. And again, it was like you had an overhead projector and you were using transparencies on there and you were moving them together. And at the beginning of the video, we saw you with the projector, and then we hone in on the actual story. So we know from the beginning it's Richard telling us a story, and
yeah,
it's your voice that's narrating it. And
yeah,
it's so powerful. That method that you've used, that sort of point of view,
yeah.
is just very powerful.
Yeah, like again, it just depends on the story. Like this time it was I got Steve and Christine, Pete and Christine, sorry, to do the voiceovers, which was, like hard because normally I'm the one that tells the story, but it's their story, and I felt like they needed to do that if they were happy to. Like I've done the animation with professional voiceover people and it just hasn't worked before because they're too good. And
Mm.
it's like that's why I ended up doing it because I could be Mavis Pat like an Aboriginal woman, which I'm not an Aboriginal woman. So it's kind of like it was okay to do that. But this story needed Christine and Pete to do that.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
I'm really looking forward to seeing that. It sounds so moving. Yeah, and I think it's going to tour after the show at the NGA.
yeah, and it's been a pretty amazing response so far from the NGA with the public programming and what they're going to do with the animation and the way that they have dementia people working with them and a lot of other access people to come into the gallery as well. So the public programming is so exciting because it's more than art. It's kind of it can touch so many different lives and it will go out there in lots of different sort of formats. So it's been fascinating.
Oh, I can imagine. Oh, because there would hardly be anybody in Australia that's not touched by dementia, someone in their family,
Yeah.
somehow connected to it. So that is, oh, I can't wait to see it.
Yeah.
Let's talk. I would just want to talk a bit about your practice and your routine. Can you tell me a bit about like, are you there? Are you in the studio 5 days, 7 days a week? How does it work?
I kind of like I'm in the studio sort of 7:30 in the morning. By 3 o'clock, I'd kind of finish. I normally would go to the boxing gym then. That's when I do that. But nowadays, I kind of it's I don't know. I can kind of either do sort of surfing or I do some other sort of exercise like Pilates. I sort of help a lot of younger artists, so I try to make that in the afternoon. And either do a studio visit, or we do a Zoom, or we do a phone call, and we talk about how they're going and where they're going and things like that. I'm trying really hard not to go in the studio like 7 days a week, but until I sort of nut out how I'm working with this next series I'm doing, I just need to be in there all the time. So it's kind of it's pretty tough going at the moment. I'm like in a deep painting hole, which requires all the energy, and that's 7 days a week, and it's it's all taxing. But you just kind of need to do that, and then pull back, hopefully soon.
And so do you find what when you do you find you have a break of a period between, bodies of work?
Not really. Like at the moment, no. Like it's just, and I feel like I'm getting a bit, probably getting a bit older, to be honest. And you kind of go, I've got to take stock. So last year, I went to London for a week, and that was the first time that I've been overseas and looked at art. And my friends were like, "You went for a week?" But that for me is quite a long time not to be in the studio. And so, like, I'm going to try maybe 2 weeks this year, and just try a bit more balance because I mean, people always go, you burn out. I don't know if you burn out, but I just feel like you need to be in the studio to find the way in which you tell the story. You need that physical time. I do anyway. I don't
Yeah.
paint the same way of painting each time. And some artists do, and that's fantastic. I kind of wish I was that person. But if I went back now and tried to paint the Adam and Eve, I couldn't do that.
Yeah, I was just thinking of that, Adam and Eve, when you said that, because that was on unprimed canvas with sort of a staining like
Yeah,
sort
it
of
was,
approach, which
yeah,
is totally different to what you're sitting in front of, for example. I love those. And it was in a huge darkened room and they were sort of glowing. The lighting was beautiful. I've got to say they did a brilliant job. And they were sort of glowing on the walls and they were scenes from the story of Adam and Eve.
yeah. Like you only sort of get one chance with those sorts of paintings. Like I would, because they're painted on unprimed canvas, but they're an aluminium stretcher, which I can't stretch. So, oh my God, the amount of times that I went back to the art shop to re-stretch was so like I think there's how many paintings? There's 12, I think. And I'm gonna say I probably painted over 100.
Wow, of that size, because they were big.
Yeah, I know. Which is just mad. It's stupid. And that's what I mean by you absolutely crazy because luckily the art shop's around the corner, so I'd walk around with them. But you kind of the waste, the uncertainty, all of that. Like my wife's like, you are mad. Why don't you do a drawing first? And I mean that would be a good idea, but it just doesn't work that way, and you kind of can't work that way. So it is just stupid. But
Oh,
I
so
just
you mean you've sort of got in your mind the scene that you're trying to depict, and you are going straight in with the paint.
Yeah, you kind of almost use yourself as a bit of a conduit, and you then channel the story and then paint. And it's brave and it's, like all of those things, but it's also really stupid because you kind of can't make a mistake, because you cannot wipe it off. Once it's on, it's on.
Oh, I'm now looking at those in a totally different way.
Yeah, I'd like to. I mean, galleries and other people would like you to kind of go, right, we can do another show like the Adam and Eve, and it just like I wish I could do it, but it just doesn't happen like that. Each body of work changes. It has its own voice. It has its own momentum, and you've got to kind of in a way start from scratch.
So when you said like you were a conduit to those stories, do you mean from your remembering from your childhood the stories?
But yeah, everything. It's kind of about listening to, audio books, reading, remembering the stories, like the visual, the religion kind of scares people. And it's sort of like, it's kind of interesting that it does scare people the most. But I mean, I've been brought up a strict Catholic and I love the visuals. I love the storytelling of all of that. And that feels like almost a comfort for me. And I kind of, like it's going back to those narratives, whether it's the 14 stations on the on the church's wall, or the confessions, or Jesus' miracles, or things like that. I actually really love those things, and I love to, make work depicting these things. And they have just as much relevance as they did then now, and I kind of that's a an important part of making the works as well.
Yeah, and they probably will for the next hundred, oh well, probably thousands of years, really.
Yeah.
Lasted 2000, so you know.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so tell me also, so with works like that, how do you ever have any trouble finding sort of deciding they're finished? I mean, that's a question I often ask artists, whether they have trouble sort of
Um,
knowing when a painting's finished.
No, I kind of just know. I'm not that sort of person that goes back and looks at a painting for an hour and hours on end and go, am I going to put a little mark there? I kind of go, once the story's told, I'm really happy to see the back of it. I like you can go, the pain is gone. No, I don't sit around and kind of contemplate it too much after the story's told.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
And
but
yeah,
you've got to kind of see the process beforehand. It's like if I've painted, say, Adam and Eve under the tree or something, I might have painted that like 20 times. So I know when it's right. I know when it's finished. I know I've got it. You
yeah,
know,
yeah.
it just seems to be such a kind of crazy process in which to do it in.
Mm. And we first met in person when at the opening of Sydney Modern Project, and you were commissioned to create that amazing 9-panel work. How do you feel about commissions? Do you like the
Um,
deadlines and that sort of thing?
I think I'm thinking that's probably the only commission I've done. I think it
Oh,
is.
right. Yeah,
Yeah, New South Wales Art Gallery are the best, and they could ask me anything, and I'll do it because I just the people that work there and the whole institution, it's fantastic. So but they left it very free for me to do whatever I wanted to, and like I just sort of said, oh, I'd like to paint the builders, the actual people that are making the museum. So it was kind of like an easy sort of direction for me to go because it wasn't the art again. It wasn't. I just wanted to focus on the actual plumbers, the sparkies, the crane drivers, everything like that. So it felt really good. And Michael and Maud were just like, whatever you want to do, this is going to be great. And
it was fabulous, and it looks so good in the gallery. Yeah,
it was just great to sort of, a record forever, really, of people. Will they look back in, like 100 years' time, and go, oh my God, they actually used concrete for this, they did this or that. And I just love it that it's built by hand. It's an amazing building, but it's built by hand.
yeah, incredible. And we did a bit of we recorded a video that day. So if anybody wants to go to the YouTube channel, they can see that. Um, Now, I love your drawings too. There's a lot of it. You've got a lot of There's some great drawings in the Art Gallery of New South Wales of the preparatory drawings of that work that we were just discussing, which are just absolutely beautiful. And I think you said one time I saw that you really find it relaxing as opposed to painting, which you don't find as relaxing. Is that right?
Yeah, 100%. It's kind of like I love drawing, and that's kind of my first go-to in a way. And I find it's like a treat. You give yourself a little bit of a like, oh, I'm going to do some drawings, and it's like just the best form of sort of discovering things in a meditative way. And I guess I've recently been doing some lithographs, and I've kind of treated those similar sort of way, and it's just this repetition of mark making, and so it's a beautiful sort of yeah, it's just different from painting. It's not the slog, it's not this real physical thing, and so yeah, I do, and I'll always treat it like a treat.
Yeah, yeah. I suppose it's smaller too, you know.
Yeah, some of them, like I mean, I'm doing a wall drawing at the NGA for the Steve animation work, and so that'll be interesting, and also at the New South Wales Art Gallery this time next year, and that's with different groups of people, and so I still like those are large scale, so they might be 9 meters by 4 meters, I think. So they're big,
Wow.
big scale drawings. So again, I like it that drawing's not like a poor man's art, and it's got to be small. It can be this big thing, but I still treat it like I don't know, like it's a relaxing sort of form of making art. And I think that should be a bad way to look at it as well. I mean, the content again depends on what stories I'm telling, but it still can be a very intimate thing, just as well as such a large, wall drawing piece as well.
That sounds so exciting that, that you're going to have. So I didn't realize there was a wall drawing for the NGA as well. So we've got those two coming up. You've got Steve exhibition. You've got Hugo Michelle next week. Probably by the time this conversation goes online, I think it might have opened, possibly, or imminently opening. You're going to be at Sydney Contemporary, I think, this year with Hugo Michelle.
Yep.
And then next year, Mother Tank Station in London, is it? So
Yeah. So
there's a lot coming up.
yeah.
Oh, Richard, it's been so wonderful talking with you. I've really enjoyed it.
Pleasure, absolute pleasure.